Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Maz and today I'm in Gloucester. And in today's video I'll be trying out this Jaguar XK. A huge thank you to my friend Craig for letting me try this out. This is my first time trying out an X150 generation of XK. And if you are an XK owner, whether it's an X100 or an X150 or any Jaguar of any sort, feel free to reach out to me and maybe I could feature it on the channel. A quick overview: the Jaguar XK nameplate has been around since the days of the XK120, but we'll gloss over that and skip to 1996 when the original XK, X100 or the XK8 was introduced, replacing the old XJS. So that X100 was out of production in 2006, being replaced by this, the X150. The old X100 had the same underpinnings as the old XJS from the 70s, but this uses an all-new aluminium platform and drops the 8 in XK8, so it's now just the XK. The XK had 3 phases. This particular one is a phase 1 with the old 4.2 V8, with the 5 litre making its way onto the phase 2 and 3. And the X150 was also designed by Ian Callum, the same designer who designed the old DB7, as well as the forthcoming F-Type. The F-Type came in 2013, but the XK stayed around for one more year, up until 2014. There have been countless of special editions of this car, such as the XKR, XKR75, XKRS 4.2, XKRS 5 litre, and XK Dynamic R. And of course, throughout its lifetime, it always had an AJ V8 and always a ZF 6-speed, whilst all the other cars in the range moved to 8-speed. And of course it has a passing resemblance to an Aston Martin. So coming to the front, this is what the very early XKs looked like for the first 3 years, from 06 to 09. As you can see, it's got the bonnet bulge from the old E-Type. The headlights sort of curve around and then point on the corner. Annoyingly, these earlier cars had the amber reflectors, which are mandated in North America, but didn't bother making them clear for everyone else. Once again, it's got the round fog lights, with the later cars having an intake here instead. The oval grille harkens back to the old E-Type, as well as the old XJ220. Interestingly, the front number plate is actually slightly shorter vertically in order to fit into this area, and it uses the same wipers as the F-Type. Coming to the side, I've always preferred the way these XKs look, especially B-pillar back, the way the deck lid swoops up a little bit with a lip spoiler on the end. And once again, it does resemble a DB9. These wheels are actually from an XJ, and these intakes were also found on the very early X250 XFs. And of course, it's got the very early door mirrors from the old X100, and it's got a traditional door handle. Coming to the back, as I've mentioned, this has the lip spoiler, which I much prefer. It's also got a hatchback tailgate, unlike the old X100. This particular one does not have the leaper here, and interestingly, the Jaguar script was on the beam, which was removed on the facelift, and then when the F-Type came, they brought it back as part of the badge. Of course, there's your XK badge without the number 8. The earlier ones were the old 4.2s. The tail lights harken back to the old E-Type, the way you got the circle on the inside and a rectangular area on the outer side. From factory, this would have dual exhausts, but this one has quad tips from the XKR. Coming to the boot, it releases electronically, and it's much bigger than on the F-Type, as well as the DB9. This is how much space you get. Interestingly, just like the XJ, you've got these grooves here to keep your luggage in place. The parcel shelf is attached to the rear window, and there's a warning sign here to tell you not to bang it on your rear passenger's head. And of course, if you need more space, there is underfloor storage and a space saver spare wheel. And to close it, you simply pull on this grab handle. Interestingly, this car still has an old-fashioned retractable aerial, like a 1981 Ford Cortina. Forgot to mention, this is what the key fob looks like. Pretty much any other Jaguar key fob from this period. Hence, it's got the older font underneath the leaper. The metal key is right here. And again, you still get the same button pattern as any other key, with the panic button at the bottom. These are mandated for North America, but I'm thankful that they kept it here in the UK as well. Coming inside, the window drops a fraction, and here's what the interior of this earlier model looks like. You do get a Jaguar script down here, and here's what the door looks like. Whilst the top of the door isn't leather wrapped, the centre is, and the lower part of the door is carpeted. Interestingly, you still get the seat adjusters on the doors like a Mercedes, and this was from a time when chrome door handles were popular. Because the B-pillar is far back, the seat belt mount is also far back, which means there is a holder for the seat belt on the seats. And here's what the seats look like. They're more Grand Tourer than sports car. And of course, it's got seats in the back, which means one thing: I'm going to try and squeeze myself in the back. So to get into the back, simply undo the belt holder. There's a releaser in the back. Push it as far forwards as possible, and that seat is getting too close to the steering wheel. There we go. And let's see if I can fit. And I sort of have, but this is what I look like. My head is touching the head lining. I'm sat bolt upright, and if you look at the seats themselves, the base is arched upwards. But at least you get back seats, unlike the F-Type, which is a strict two-seater. You do get Isofix anchor points in there, and interestingly, the seat belts come from the centre. So if you're sat on the left, you have to reach over your right shoulder to mount your belt. But that being said, so if you're trapped in the back and the seat belt is on, it's easier for firefighters to cut off the belt like that. There's even a coat hook over here and a decent armrest. But that does mean it's a strict two-seat in the back. You even get a speaker there. And I've yet to pull this back. Do I dare? And it won't even click into place properly. My knees are in the way. And that seat is far forward, so it's definitely not advised to sit here in the back. Just to show you, I'm actually leant forward, so no space in the back at all. Now inside, on the driver's seat, things are a lot more interesting. So from my point of view, this is what the steering wheel looks like. Just to clarify, this is actually aftermarket, but the center area is OEM. The steering wheel looks exactly like the one you get on the XF. Back in the days, Jaguar would put a growler on their steering wheel, and this one is no exception. And this is also an older style growler, as you can tell by how wrinkly it looks. And it's got the older font on top. You get two dials here on this side for your radio, and one dial here for your cruise control. If you see another dial here, that means it's got radar guided cruise control. The indicator stalks are exactly like the ones you get on the X250 XF. The dials are also the same as the X250, and interestingly, this mirror is also seen on the X260, the one that I owned previously. The headliner on this one is very fuzzy, and yes, drop the mirror and you get two lights flanking each side of the mirror. The overhead console, all you get are dome lights and these three buttons here. Not sure what these buttons do, and neither does the owner of this car. Any other XK owners, please comment below what that's for. The seats do feel very comfortable, but you still get generous bolster on them. The headrest is not integrated to the seat back and can be adjusted up or down, and they are very thick as well. But there are no shoulder supports, of course. The general look of the dash, unfortunately, has started to show its age a lot, especially on this Phase 1 model. There's a lot of symmetry on this design. You get air vents on the center console. Unfortunately, they don't rotate like they do on the XF. Here's the glove box, which drops down dramatically, whereas on the XF, it's dampened like this. This particular car does have the extended leather, but it's a very thin and pebbly material. And once again, the seats, the leather on the seats aren't exactly Napa leather or Windsor leather, so I'm guessing this is the standard leather you get on any other JLR product. The pedals are exactly like the ones you get from the Blue Oval, but you can get metal plates for them, which I much prefer. Once again, you do get this center console armrest, which opens like this, and it has a very generous cubby underneath with two cup holders, though bizarrely one is bigger than the other. Don't know what this is for exactly, maybe for coins. And if I drop the center console, this can then be adjusted forwards like so. This very early example has the traditional gear selector as opposed to the rotary dial, which unfortunately I prefer the dial. You've got an ashtray here with a lighter next to it. Unfortunately, it doesn't stay in place, it just keeps on retracting. You got your ASL here and your start stop button here, which is in red, though I would be curious to see if this fits on the F-Type as well. And you get a massive chrome parking brake. Interestingly, the adjuster for the steering wheel is exactly like the one on the F-Type, and if you step into a Ford from this period, this is actually used to adjust your mirrors instead of the steering wheel. Turning on the ignition, you have to press and hold. This is what the screen looks like in the middle, and there's not really much controls for the center screen, just your radio and your cruise control. And this is your Jaguar infotainment system from back in the day. So climate control here. As you can see, it's very pixelated and laggy, and the heated seats, you have to go through the screen, and same with your fan speed. It's not part of the HVAC system, which I'll come back to later on. Once again, back. Sat nav. Here's what it looks like. Interestingly, triangle way, which is not at all showing on this map we're in. So back once again, and vehicle settings right here. So trip, clock, display, system, and vehicle settings. There's even a valet mode. And if you want, when you reverse, you can make your passenger mirror dip to see the curbs better, like a BMW. And I forgot to mention, the screensaver can either be a Jaguar Leaper or the clock. And yes, there is a home button shortcut right here. And here's what the controls for your HVAC look like. They look more like a hi-fi dial. Luckily you got 2-zone climate control, a heated front screen, a heated rear screen, and a defroster. This car still has a CD player here, and that's about it. Also, in order to lock the car, you just simply push on the door releaser, like so. One last thing, if you want, you can turn off the traction control in your Grand Tourer. So that's the exterior and interior done now, so let's see what this car is like to drive. So seatbelt on, foot on the brake, and window down. Revs have dropped, and there's a soft limiter at 4,500 RPM. Slightly higher than the F-Type. So let's put it into drive and make our way out. So from first impressions already, the accelerator is twitchy in this car. Steering wheel feels a lot bigger than on the F-Type. Luckily the steering is still very weighty, so I get a lot more feedback. So leaving this supermarket car park, due to its size, it is a little bit harder to see where the front of the car is. Probably because I'm more used to sitting low down in the F-Type. I could jack this seat up if I want to, but then it will look like I'm sat like this. Feels more like a muscle car as well when putting your foot down. But of course this is a Grand Tourer first and sports car second. And this is the earlier 4.2. Oh, and I forgot to mention, here's what the stats are for this car. And so far this ZF 6-speed is doing its job very, very well. Setting off in first gear, it feels very relaxed, it feels more cosseting, and I don't feel as much undulations. And here we are at stop-start traffic. One thing this XK does very well is do the job of the XJ as well. It's very cosseting, it's very relaxing, and just like any other Jaguar I've driven, very cocooned from the outside world. Bearing in mind I'm in stop-start traffic in Eastern Avenue. Interestingly, in the old X100, if you want to go into manual mode, you push it to the left and then you would row the gears forwards and back. But in this, you just leave it in S and then use the paddles on here. And once you shift into sport, you get an S sign show up, and then you pull a paddle and it shows you which gear you're in from 1 to 6. And as I've mentioned, all of these XKs had a 6-speed ZF. Unfortunately, the 8-speed never made it into these cars. And the gear selector does feel a lot more plush in this one. In the X100 that I've driven, it felt more loose and it would clatter on every movement. But this, nice and dampened. One thing I'd wish this car would have is a digital reader in between the two dials. In this one, I'm still having to look to the analog speedo to the left. Here comes another red light. And then gradually come to a stop. After they discontinued the XK and brought in the F-Type, I did wish that they could have made a bigger F-Type, like an F-Type 2+2, to fill in the gap that the XK left, since the old E-Type had a 2+2 option as well. But then again, it could ruin the lines. And one thing I like about this XK is that it does look like an Aston Martin, as it was designed by the same designer. One thing I'm not a fan of is that the infotainment system, all the sub-menus are all the way to the left-hand side, as if it was made for left-hand drive, which it probably was. So from where I'm sat, I have to reach all the way over there to operate the system. And onto Barton Street. This is probably the most comfortable car that I've driven, bar the XJ. I'm going through all these imperfections and speed bumps, but they are not coming through the cabin at all. I can hear them, I can just barely feel them, but it's almost as though I'm wafting through this road. Here comes a rough part. Yep, it's gone through that very well. And thanks to the steering of this car, I do feel a lot more of the road, which in city driving may sound a bit counterintuitive, but I can promise you it works very well. I can fully predict where the wheels are going to turn and where the car's going to go. Unlike that Mercedes CLE that I've driven, where it felt a bit on the vague side. Easy on the arms to turn, but as far as pointing the car, it was a little bit on the vague side. Hold assist in this car, but in this I can just put it into park like so, and then take my foot off the brake. But because this has a traditional selector, that does mean the reverse lights do flash for a brief second, going from drive to park. And like I mentioned, I still prefer the dial. Traffic is moving once more. Back to drive, and off we go. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, there is not a single USB port in here. So if you want to charge your phone, you're going to have to use the traditional cigarette lighter. Overall visibility is very good. Because this car has back seats, it has bigger rear quarter windows, so the C-pillar isn't as huge in this one. And if I do put my foot down a little bit, I mentioned it's very quiet, but you can still hear the engine growl, like so. Which means it's quiet when you need it, but makes good noise when you want it. What is it like on Sport? Yes, it does jerk a bit on Sport, due to the fact it only has 6 gears as opposed to 8. But for 2006, this is still very good. So that was Barton Street done. So despite how low it looks, and how low profile the tyres are, it rides as comfortable as a luxury limo. Let's see what it's like in city driving. Feel very isolated to the outside world. It's fairly busy here. It is the school rush hour here in Gloucester, and I can't even hear the general outside noise into Clarence Street. Let's quickly put it into Sport, pull a paddle. Turn right, and let's quickly put the window down and it still likes to make some noise. It's nowhere near as raucous as the F-Type R that I've driven, but it is still more than enough. And volume wise, I'd say this is probably the sweet spot as far as engine noise goes. And here comes the signature Station Road to Bruton Way oblique left-hander after this traffic light. Any body roll? Okay. I did start to slip off my seat, but I don't think the car itself started to roll. So if only this car had the performance seats as seen on the later Jaguars, I think this would have been the perfect combination. But no body roll in the car, just me slipping off my seat. Yep, once again I'm slipping off the seat, but the car is still well planted. So one last thing to check what it's like on the open road. One thing I've noticed, that I'm still on drive and I put my foot down, it still likes to lurch forward like I'm in sport. That could be just the limitations of this gearbox and that it has 2 fewer gears. But that's only if you give it half throttle. And well, I'm currently in the 50 zone, so I'm not going to put my foot down just yet. Okay, here we are, national speed limit. So on the roundabout, putting the gearbox into S. Okay, that really wakens up the car. And yep, just one shift of the gearbox and the car completely wakes up. Look, it's way more eager to kick down, and it's way more eager to keep the revs up. I'm currently doing 50 and it's at 3000 RPM. On the roundabout once again. Yeah, so the gearbox in sport does not rev any lower than 2000 RPM. So yes, it's very fun to drive on the open road, whether it's an A road or a B road. And kickdown is very, very good. So let's go to that roundabout, make a U-turn and see what it's like in manual mode. Okay, on the roundabout right now. Well, sport mode, it's even more lurchy, as if I'm driving a twin clutch car. Okay, on the roundabout, might as well use the paddles right now. Okay, back on the slip road. 3, 2, 1 and shift down. One thing I like is that it still has the odd pop and bang, and unfortunately there is a lot of delay with changing gears. So there's a paddle, there's the paddle, and there's a change, and pull up. Probably takes nearly a second to change gear after I pull the paddle. Judging by the fact this is from 2006, it is fairly acceptable. It's only later on the XK's life that 6-speeder was starting to show its age. And let's face it, the ZF 8-speed is probably the industry leading torque converter automatic gearbox currently on the market. Do that again, so 5, 4, 3, put down. It may be a Grand Tourer first and a sports car second, but that is a very close second place. It can easily do the sporty handling characteristics very well, even on these very fast-paced roundabouts. So let's take this car back to the car park and finalize this video. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching me try out this Jaguar XK 4.2 X150. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you are new, ring the bell to stay up to speed, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers!